Hi there everyone, my name's Dave West. I hope we're all doing well. So welcome back to the ultimate video test, and this evening I'm checking out the Xiaomi Mi 10 Lite. Now this is the Poco X3 NFC's brother from another mother, so it looks pretty much the same. The way the camera is laid out is the same, but it's a little bit cheaper and it's missing a couple of little features which I'll explain in this video. Now I've come out at this time of the evening because it'll serve two purposes, and that is daylight but also approaching a bit of twilight. So the sun is actually set now behind me, so slightly tricky lighting situation, although it's coping pretty well with the front-facing camera. The front-facing camera being a 16 megapixel fixed focus camera, and this records video at up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. There's no 60 fps option or anything fixed on this. It is literally just 1080p 30, and you can add a little movie frame option which boxes off top and bottom to give you a cinematic style look. Now, the front facing camera has built-in electronic image stabilization, which is a bit of a one-up against the Poco X3 NFC, which didn't have any stabilization at all. But it doesn't have anything like auto HDR or anything, which you can see looking at the sky behind me, which is blown out. If I just tilt the camera, you can see that there is a little bit of colour in the sky, but you can see it is blown out due to the highlight control on the camera. Can't really argue, this is about £200 to buy, maybe a little bit more depending on where you shop. So you can't really ask for too much, and overall the colours are nice, stabilisation is good, and overall video quality looks really decent. Now to give you a little illustration, this is the movie frame option. Now it literally is just adding some black bars to the top and bottom of the image, and I'm having to hold the phone really far away on my Gorilla Pod just to fit my big head in the frame. But as you can see, we still retain the excellent stabilization, and the video quality looks pretty decent at the same time. Alright, so moving to the rear cameras then. Starting off with the ultra wide camera, and this is an 8 megapixel fixed focus camera, and this tops out at 1080p at 30 frames per second. So you still got really decent image stabilization, but as you can see it does struggle a little bit with highlight control, especially with the sky. So if I just tilt the phone up a little bit, you will see it starts to bring a bit of the colour out of the sky. But if I just come down this way, the outer fringes of the lens means it does blow out and clip some of the highlights, although it's not too bad, to be perfectly honest, and the auto exposure adjustment is pretty decent and lights up the parts of the image which matter most. And here is the 64 megapixel main camera, so good opportunity here to check out the autofocus, which you can see is excellent. We're moving through different subjects, and if I move from one to the other, you'll see it reacts nice and quickly. It's got a nice smooth mechanism as well, which helps it to lock nicely onto closer subjects. So this also has electronic image stabilization, as you can see. And it's doing a good job with these murky leaves and all of the green colour. So moving out a bit into areas of a bit more light. Now looking at the leaves left and right, obviously it is post sunset now, so the phone is struggling a bit with exposure. But as I move out into a slightly lighter area, you can see these clouds become a bit more prominent and better exposed. And turning over this way, slightly shadowy, so it's crushing out the shadows, but it does give a reasonably good image with a little bit of drama included as well. And if you can tap on the screen, and this allows you to lock and then set your exposure and focus on distant subjects, although you do get really bad crushed shadows here. Just tap anywhere on the screen to bring it back to normal. Now while I'm zoomed into subjects, I suppose it's a quick opportunity to show you this super macro video option. So this, just like the Poco X3 NFC, records at a max of 720p at 30 frames per second. It's by no means ideal. However, you do get a reasonably okay super macro function. You can see there's lots of fuzzy details there. But it isn't too bad, and if it's just occasional, you're not really looking for the effect more than the quality, then I think this does a pretty decent job overall. Now, one thing is it doesn't have any electronic image stabilization or optical stabilization, so framing shots can be a little bit tricky if doing things handheld. But the option is there, which isn't on other phones, so I guess that's a bit of a win in terms of features. But you let me know what you think down in the comments. So moving on to 1080p at 60 frames per second then. And this is only available on the 64 megapixel main camera. You can't use the ultra wide camera like you can with the Poco X3 NFC. Now, slightly challenged by these low light conditions, and you'll notice the stabilization is not as good as when using 30 frames per second. But nonetheless, I just wanted to show you this so you can see how it performs at 60 FPS. It's got some nice colours there in the clouds being generated by the sun, which is cool. And as far as detail and colours goes, I mean, it's not too bad. Let's not forget this is a budget handset, and I think having this 60 FPS option will be useful for a lot of people. Alright, so this is 4K 30 frames per second then. So we can just see a little bit more detail using this mode. So you can see the autofocus isn't affected, you know, the speed and the handling of close-up subjects. But the one thing that it is missing, and again versus the Poco X3 NFC, is electronic image stabilization, which you can see is absent when recording in 4K. So it's a little bit of a shame because, you know, the target market for this phone are likely going to want to use 4K 30 frames per second at some point, and the lack of stabilization might be a bit of a deal breaker for those people. But if you use slightly more careful footsteps like this, I mean, you can't stop the wobbling. But if you're really serious about using this phone and using it in 4K, you could always use some form of mechanical stabilization. Or if you can't afford that, then you can just use Google Photos or your chosen editing software to stabilize the footage instead. Alright, so also making its way from the Poco X3 NFC is dual video mode. So this allows you to use the front-facing camera and the main rear camera to have this dual recording effect. So that's one perspective, and that's another perspective. So it just shows you what I was seeing versus what you were seeing, and vice versa. Now, there's no stabilization on the front-facing camera in this mode, but you can see it is working on the rear-facing camera, which is cool. And the good thing is you can toggle the modes like this, and it moves the priority of the image around the display, which is pretty cool. And finally, just to finish off the video, this is the movie frame option at 4K at 30 frames per second. And the phone is struggling a little bit with exposure. You can see everything's a bit crushed here in the shadows, but scene wise, I think this is a really cool function to showcase shots like this. And if you really like the image that you're taking a video of, you can take a little snapshot using the built-in snapshot button in the video function, and then it saves to your camera roll so you can use it later on. Alright, so that's the end then of the ultimate video test for the Xiaomi Mi 10 Lite. Got to be quiet, there's people's houses around. Hope you've enjoyed this look at this pretty neat and cheap Xiaomi handset. Not perfect by all means, but what can you expect for around about 200 quid? But as always, you be the judge, and you let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you're new around here, then please do consider subscribing so that there's more videos coming like this on the channel very, very soon. But for now, this has been my look at the Xiaomi Mi 10 Lite. My name's Dave West, and I'll catch you guys later.